Hi, this is Janine Miller, and you are watching Pieces of Victory. Today we have on our show Nikki Stover. Nikki is a survivor of a lockdown residential program called Lighthouse that was located in Jay, Florida. It originated in Ramona, California, and it was called Victory Christian Academy. I was in this lockdown residential program in 1988. It originated in 1985. It shut down in 1991 in Ramona due to not meeting fire code standards and being unlicensed. There were numerous reports on child abuse, and yet he wasn't even prosecuted. This preacher was free to roam in Mexico, opening up another facility, abusing more children. It was called Genesis by the Sea. Mexico shut it down. Mexico shut it down due to finding a holding cell for children. And yet America kept it open for another 24 years in the state of Florida. It was called Victory Christian Academy, and then they rebranded it, most likely because of all of these allegations, to Lighthouse. Nikki suffered emotional, physical, and spiritual abuse. She was brutally raped by a staff member inside this compound. The second time around, she found out she was pregnant a week later after being locked into the facility. And staff knew she was pregnant, and yet they continued to abuse her. And they tackled her to the ground, causing a miscarriage. The alleged murder took place inside this lockdown facility. Nikki is writing a book called Little Scars. She's an activist amongst the survival community, and she is bravely here today to tell her story of what goes on behind closed doors. Please welcome to the show, Nikki Stover. Hey, Nikki, how are you doing today? Welcome to the show, Pieces of Victory.
Hi. Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you so much for being brave and telling your story of what happened to you in a lockdown residential program called Lighthouse that was located in the state of Florida. Can you go ahead and tell us the beginning of what exactly happened? What was your childhood like, and what led up to being locked into this program?
Oh, okay. So my parents got a divorce whenever I was 7 years old, and that kind of started everything for me. I was pretty angry. My dad got remarried to someone, and he had two other kids. So my mom and my dad have me and my brother, and then my dad and my stepmom have two other kids. And whenever she had my oldest little brother with him, they started, tightening down, I guess. And I was a rebellious teenager. Like, it wasn't one of those things where my parents were just like mean to me or whatever. I just did what I wanted to do. So I would sneak out. I had a drug problem super early on. And I think I want to say that the very first time that I got sent there, it was for self-mutilation. And so I had actually, a friend of mine at school had told on me to a guidance counselor, and the school had mandated that I go through Baker Act before I could come back to school. And then pretty much I was in Baker Act for a few days, and my parents came and picked me up, and they were telling me the whole ride there, how we were going home. And then I actually fell asleep in the car, and whenever I woke up, we were actually at Lighthouse. Like, we weren't home.
That's similar to what happened to me. I was in Victory Christian Academy in Ramona, California, which is essence the same program because they just rebranded it because there were so many allegations on the preacher from hell that was running it. Okay, so here you are locked up in this residential program. You had no idea that you were going to be in this place. Did they even think about getting you counseling? What was the program you were at before?
So with the counseling, my parents did get me counseling. However, the therapist that they sent me to was a family therapist, and his idea of helping me was just hurt her. If she's doing something you don't like, hurt her. He was very adamant about like flicking me in the forehead.
What kind of a counselor is this? Somebody recommended by the church?
No, I actually don't know where he came from. I know that my mom was like super against it, and I think that since I've gotten older,
either was it a tough love program or?
I guess. I mean, we would go. It was like a family counseling setting, but it was pretty much just a like slam Nikki fest, and like there was no winning. He would try to ask me, how I felt about certain things, and then I would start explaining, like whenever so and so yells at me, it makes me feel this way, and he's like, "Well, you're a kid. You're too young to know what you like or what you want. You're too stupid to figure that out." So, and he just like. Yeah, so he would just like brush it off, and that was pretty much how counseling went. So that's part of the reason why I ended up resorting to self-mutilation, was because I was 15 years old and I did not know how to deal. Now, disclaimer, my dad is a lot better with my little brothers. Like he's come a very far way. But I think that my parents just got to the point to where they didn't know what to do. Some families are more on the tough love side. And so I think that Lighthouse was an honest mistake on my parents' behalf. But I have had questions about it as an adult, because I will never forget when I was 13 years old, I got sent to the Lighthouse Children's Home in Tallahassee, which is not to be confused with the place in Jay. Right. And that was actually a very easygoing. I mean, we all felt like family. It was fun stuff. It was just I was 13 years old and I wanted my mom,
In school.
Yes. It was like a boarding school, but there was a lot of love and affection. It's nothing like these places. And so I acted out to be able to go home. And I remember my dad bringing me home at 13 years old, and he had bought me this blue journal and this special ink pen, and he was like, "I want you to keep a journal about the things that you went through at Lighthouse." He's like, "Is there anything I need to know about? Did anything happen that shouldn't have happened?" And I remember thinking it was just so weird, like the questions that he was asking me. And so I'm like, why are you asking me all this stuff? Like, none of these people in Tallahassee did anything to me. And so he pulls out his computer and he shows me pictures of Jay, Florida Lighthouse. And I will never forget, there were rape allegations, there were abuse allegations. I mean, the list went on, and there was this whole blog from all of these girls who had been to this place that were saying all these things about it. And for some reason, the green fake marble tables in the dining hall just stuck with me. So whenever I was 15 and they dropped me off at this place, the pastor of this place was waiting for me outside, and he brought me into the dining hall, and I will never forget the horror that I felt, because it was the exact same dining hall as the pictures my dad had shown me whenever he was worried something had happened to me.
So why the hell did they send you there if they knew beforehand all the allegations that they found?
That's been my question. My mom says that she didn't know anything about that place. I feel like she was there whenever I had that conversation with my dad, but I could have been confusing it with my stepmom. I've like blocked a lot out. But it has always stuck with me. Like, they knew there were these allegations, but I've also heard from some of the other girls that the people who ran J Florida were very silver-tongued, very, because there's some other girls that their parents had seen the allegations while they were in the process of getting all the paperwork done. And they would ask the people who ran it about that, and they would say things like, "Oh, these are just allegations. They've never been proven. Your daughter's in great hands." Oh, yeah. And honestly, whenever parents came over, for visitation and stuff, we really did have to act like everything was great, like just this big happy family, and that can't be farther from the case.
Right. And I can identify what you're saying, because we had social services pay us a visit, and if we even gave them an eye contact or rolled our eyes or did something to indicate that this was abusive, we would be punished. If you thought your life was a living hell at that present time, it would be far worse if you opened your mouth. So we knew better not to say anything. We couldn't say anything to our parents. We couldn't say anything to social services. It was awful. So here, your parents are sending you. Your father has an idea of allegations. It's ironic that he sent you to a lighthouse that was normal, and he was asking you to write things in a journal. But
I have never sat down with my dad and been like, hey, this is what. My biggest thing with my dad is and if he watches this, I don't want him or any of my parents to feel guilty, if that makes sense, because I know what kind of teenager that I was, and I know that they were doing what they thought was best. I mean, they had a kid who was, the second time that I got sent there, it was for running away and being gone for 3 or 4 days. Like, they thought I was dead. So I think that to them, it was more or less they were afraid that they couldn't keep me safe from myself. And I think it was desperation, and having kids, I can definitely sympathize with that. But at the same time, everything was there online, like it was all the box and same thing with us with social services. I mean, there was 4 different times in the 2 times that I was there that social services came there, and we all got a briefing. I mean, we all got pulled into the dorms, and female staff was talking to us while they were in the front talking to CPS and like letting us know, if you mention this, you'll be floored whenever they leave. If you say this, you're going straight to the box. And it's like, well, who do we trust? Because if we talk to these people, there's a chance they're going to leave us here with them,
Yeah, there's a big chance, because CPS doesn't seem to be doing anything. And
at all.
Why would a kid open their mouth if CPS or any of the authorities don't do anything? Why would you take that risk?
Right.
CPS is listening to this, because I just feel that even if a kid opens their mouth, what are you doing? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And so why is a kid going to jeopardize they're trying to survive child abuse. And if you can't help them.
We wanted to so bad. I mean, we would just be looking at each other almost like, if you say something, I will, and we just couldn't, because then there would always be that. I had told a girl that I was very close with, which we weren't supposed to have friends. But she and I were very close, and the last time that I was there, the very last time that CPS came, I said, you know what? I'm just going to act out and make them floor me so that they can see, so that they see that this is what's happening.
What happened?
And so I did. I started acting out, and nobody did anything.
Of course, their best behavior. Oh my God. The
staff member that was the biggest on flooring people actually came up to me, and she was very calm with me, and she says, Georgia, which was my name whenever I was at Lighthouse, she says, you're going to get 500 lines for that, and I just want you to understand that this is not acceptable behavior. And I'm just sitting there looking at her like, no, tackle me. Like,
knock me down. That's not what you normally do, lady. Oh my God.
And then whenever they left, I was in the box for 3 days.
Sure. Yeah, I bet social services they didn't even know about the box. That's terrible. Tell me, Nikki, when you first arrived at this lockdown residential program, did they make you strip? Did they watch you? Were you made to scrub your hair with lice-medicated shampoo? Did they check you? What was the drill?
So I did have to wash my hair with lice-medicated shampoo, but I was never checked for lice, which was weird. The other thing was, I've talked to a lot of the other girls, and they all had the same, at least one of the same staff members as the 2 staff members that I had. But we'll just call one of them Satan's helper, because she was god-awful. So this specific staff member, all the other girls have said that whenever they were brought in, that she would hold up a towel and they would get undressed, like in the shower stall. And for me, there was no towel. And I have talked to one other girl who also was interested in females during that time, who has said the same thing. Now, whenever I had my new girl shower, it was probably one of the things that still haunts me the most, because of the weirdness of it. She takes me into this, and it's like a little shower stall. I mean, it's seriously not that big. You can't open your arms in it. And there's one curtain, and then there's like the shower curtain. So you have like a little area to get undressed. And she leaves the shower curtain open, and the other staff member's standing there with her, and she's like, you have to undress now. And I just remember thinking, like, absolutely not. You need to close the curtain. And she's like, well, we have to make sure that you're not bringing anything here. And here I am, 15 years old. My parents just literally left me. I don't even know what city I'm in. Like, I didn't even know where Jay, Florida was. I had no idea how far from home it was. And so I start undressing, and this one specific staff member is just staring at me. And it sounds weird, but it wasn't like a I'm watching you kind of stare. It was like she enjoyed it. And she continued, whenever all the other new girls have said that whenever they had their shower, they were able to close the shower curtain. I wasn't allowed to close the shower curtain. I had to take a shower with the curtain open, and she kept watching me. And so at one point, like, I looked at her, and we made eye contact, and she was like, do not look at me because your parents have already told me that you're gay. And I just remember thinking that was just like the most uncomfortable, like, you're standing here pretty much checking me out naked as a jaybird in the shower, but you don't want me to, I don't understand. You know what I could not rationalize it in my head. And all the way up until the time that I got out and got finished drying off, she continued to stare at me. We had to use, they gave us like a shower basket there's a new girl shower basket, and it has the lice shampoo, and a certain kind of body wash, and you get like a washcloth. But you had to use the lice shampoo, and you had to use the body wash. Kind of like we were just like filthy animals. Like we were just disgusting, and we had to clean off. It was so awkward.
They made you delouse, and they didn't even check your hair to see if you had lice. They never checked our hair. Did you tell your parents that you were bisexual, gay?
I had never told my mom. My mom, she knows now. But during that time, the only person I had ever told was my stepmom and my dad. My stepmom and my dad are more culturally accepting, I guess. My dad's he's just a cool, laid-back guy. He's like your tall, bearded rocker guy. Like, my dad's just fun-loving, easygoing kind of guy. So my dad knew that I had girlfriends. And he never really had anything negative to say about it. He just pretty much wanted me to understand that it could potentially make my life a little bit more difficult as far as people having nasty things to say and stuff like that. But my parents did know.
It sounded like your father supported you. So I would like to know why that conversation came up with Lighthouse in the first place.
I honestly think that it was something that they asked all the parents. Like, I genuinely would not be surprised if it was something that was on your application coming in.
And you didn't think anything of it. Well, your father, since he was the only one that you told, and the stepmom, he probably didn't think anything of it because he didn't think that it was a problem or an issue.
Right.
He was very accepting of it. So he didn't think that these people were going to condemn you for it. The one thing he was trying to protect you, he just threw you into the wolves, and he didn't know it. And that's so sad. Because what do they do to the girls that are either bisexual or gay in this program? Do you want to see? I mean, I know from my experience at Victory Christian Academy, but I would like to know what went on at Lighthouse.
There's a couple different methods that they have. for one, they make it a point to preach sermons about how terrible you are if you're gay. And they will make eye contact with you. Like, you and everybody around you now knows. So even if this was something that you weren't even open about in the real world, now I don't even know what word I would use for it. Lighthouse is literally like its own little civilization. It's literally a cult. So now you're in your own little civilization and everybody knows your business. Also, you get put on what's called separation from other girls. And these are girls that you've never met in your life. You haven't done anything wrong. You've never had a weird conversation with them. Nothing. Like, you don't know these people from Adam. And now you're on separation. And separation is where you get to wear a pretty little pink shirt and you go with one of your peers. They have these things called helpers. And they're one of your peers that are literally pitted against you like police officers. And they write you your demerits, which are like your ticket. Like, if I'm on separation from you, if I'm going to class, every hallway, every doorway that I come through, they're going to announce Nikki coming through dining hall. I mean, it's the most shameful thing. And then when we get in the circle, we have to, at mealtimes, we have to get in the circle and we have to sing a Bible verse and say a prayer before we can eat. Yes. So, like, if I'm on separation from you, if I'm going to class, every hallway, every doorway that I come through, they're going to announce Nikki coming through dining hall. I mean, it's the most shameful thing. And then when we get in the circle, we have to, at mealtimes, we have to get in the circle and we have to sing a Bible verse and say a prayer before we can eat.
So I just want the audience to know a bit of a background of what it's like in these places. If you're bisexual or if you're gay, that the preachers and staff members and girls will make you feel like you're an untouchable. So you already feel like an untouchable already because you're the problem, the child's a problem, the adults are right, and now it's an untouchable within the untouchables, if that makes any sense. The more and more we talk about this program, you'll start understanding. I wanted you to explain about how you were segregated in this place for being gay. And let's go back to when you first arrived there. This is a staff member. She's looking at you up and down. You can't close the curtains. She knows you're gay because apparently your family had to fill something out. Maybe they asked, numerous questions about you, and they didn't think anything of it, but little did they know you were an abomination to God under this cult. So why is she looking at you up and down if it's an abomination to God? Is she a staff member? Was she a girl in the program that came back to be a staff? What was she?
So this particular staff member, the first time that I came there, she had been there since I believe she was either 16 or 17, but never as a girl. Her father was an alcoholic who abused her mother rampantly. So all that I really know on that backstory is that she, I guess, confided in the people who ran the place. And she was kind of raised in church. And I think that she had reached out to this school for some kind of help. So she actually ended up being a staff member. She actually went to school with the girls. So she actually graduated school while I was there. And she left, I believe, when she was like 20 or 21. But she was essentially a peer who was put in a place of power over us. And to be honest, she was horrible. She had no empathy towards any of the girls. I remember she would come into the dorm whenever we were in Love Dorm, which was the dorm upstairs. That was her dorm. And she would read us bedtime stories. And this one night, there was several of us that couldn't sleep because she had caught wind that there was a girl in the school who had had an abortion at some point. And she literally, our bedtime story was telling us the process of what an abortion was.
Oh my God.
and then whenever she was done telling us, she was like, okay guys, that's it, good night, love you, see you tomorrow, and flipped the lights off and walked out like she had just told us, you know, the story of the 3 pigs.
Oh my God. That's so demented. Okay, so how old is she at this point? Is she 16?
At this point, she was roughly 18.
18. Okay. All right. I just wanted to clarify her age with the audience for future reference. Okay, so she's looking at you in the shower when you are entering into school. You're delousing. She had you keep the curtain open. You're feeling uneasy at this point. She would not allow you at all to close the curtain, and she just kept staring at you, looking you up and down. Oh my gosh, that's awful. Did you ever have to go to the Get Right room immediately? And did you call it the Get Right room or the Room of Grace at that point?
We had a couple different names for it. We called it the Room of Grace. We called it the Grace room. We called it the Get Right room, but my generation was lazy, so we mainly referred to it as the GR room.
Right. It's interesting how they call it the Room of Grace when Jesus, when he died for our sins. That's what grace is all about. He's not sticking children in the Get Right room. Unbelievable. We
also referred to it as the box. I did get sent to the box numerous times. Just a little bit of backstory. I'm sorry, I don't mean to keep rambling, but on this particular staff, so we had the shower incident where she kept staring me up and down. I came in on a Friday night, and I don't know how you guys did it, but we had like Friday fun nights.
Right, we did too. It was the same.
It was basically, for anybody who's not familiar with it, it was more or less a certain staff member would be assigned a Friday night, and they would come up with like these fun activities. If you were a white shirt or a new girl, which a white shirt, somebody who isn't in any trouble, we would get to go do like these fun activities. And some of them honestly were generally pretty fun. If you were an orange shirt, which is detention, or if you were on separation, you had to go sit in the classroom. You got a cup of water, a cheese sandwich, and a fruit cup, and you wrote your lines all night. And these would go on. Most of them ended around 10 or 11, but some of them would go out until 12 or 12:30 in the morning. I came in on a Friday night. It was a kind of like a whodunit kind of night. The Victorian house had little hints and clues hidden all throughout the house, and we had to solve like a murder mystery, which was weird because we're not even allowed to say the word murder.
Right.
Yeah, so
or Madonna or anything else. That is strange.
Pants, the word pants. You couldn't say that. But so yeah, it was a little strange for me because I immediately started noticing things about the girls. I'm kind of a nerd, so I'm a people watcher, and I noticed the way some of the other girls were looking at me, and it wasn't like the first lighthouse that I went to in Tallahassee. The first lighthouse in Tallahassee that I went to, it was kind of like, yay, you're here, like things are going to be so much better for you, and this is such a loving place, and staff were so loving and warm and open-armed, and these girls would look at me, and it was like a look of horror. And this is not from the girls who are in trouble. This is not from the girls who are refusing to bend the system. This is the girls who are straight up as brainwashed as they come, looking at me with like almost like they wanted to cry because I was there. And my helper, because whenever you're a new girl and you're in a yellow shirt, you stay with a helper, which I think you said you wanted to get into that in a little bit.
Right.
But my helper, she kept explaining things to me. And so she would say things to me like, you can't say yeah, you have to say yes.
Right.
And you can get in trouble for that. And I think it was like 2 weeks after a new girl, you could start getting demerits. Well, that first Friday night, this particular staff member watched me like a hawk. Like we're going around trying to find clues, and I'm in total shock. I honestly wish my dad would have just sent me there on a Monday so I could have had time to process, because they don't give you an option to sit out a Friday night. I mean, my family just literally left me here with complete and total strangers, and now I have to like get on board to a group activity and be excited, and I just got out of Baker Act. I don't even know what's going on.
You're not happy. You're trying to process it.
No, and I'm also in a state of shock.
You are almost better off in the box. I actually volunteered to go into the Get Right room when I first got there because I needed to process what just happened to me. And I wanted to get away from these crazy people because I started venting and I couldn't even vent. That I was on an honor roll mention and I'm locked up into a reform school and now I'm in prison and I want a phone call and I can't make a phone call. I needed time to process. So I volunteered and then they dragged me to the Get Right room. But go ahead. You're now in happy land, so to speak, in the middle of a war, and you're playing volleyball on the beach just to break up the monotony. You still have to go back to war. So it's not a permanent thing. It's just a once a week thing if you qualify. So here you are trying to decompress and you can't. Then what happens?
I was definitely on sensory overload. There were girls running all around me, and I kind of felt like those movies that you watch where people are going like at a crazy rate of speed and that one person's just like standing there. I felt very lost. I couldn't really keep up with my helper because I was too busy like trying to make sense of it. I mean, I'm seeing all this new stuff and I'm starting to notice that the door, a staff member walked out of a door, and whenever she closed it, it made this weird noise. And that's whenever the helper that had me, she's like, hey, whenever they say turn, you have to turn around because you can't see them put in the code. And I'm like, what code? And that's whenever it gets explained to me that this is a lockdown facility. Like, there's no leaving. There's magnet locks on the doors, and as soon as it closes, you're not getting out. And so the other staff member, while she's explaining to me about the door, she's just staring at me. And so a couple minutes later, we run off to go. Everybody was meeting, and we had just solved the mystery, and I think we were fixing to go. I want to say we were fixing to either go to the backyard or we were fixing to go out to the pool, which we only used twice in the 2 times that I was there. And that staff member she was just frantic, like I had run away. She's like, where's the new girl? Where is the new girl? Who has the new girl? And it was weird because I'm sitting there thinking, like, I'm right here and I have a name. Like, my name is not new girl. I have a name. And she grabs me by the arm and she snatches me over to her and she says, you don't go anywhere unless I tell you that you go somewhere. And I'm just kind of looking at her, and I was so confused. And at this point, I'm not trying to be combative with them. Like, I'm just trying to understand everything that's going on, because I went from a house where the rules were, do what you're supposed to in school, and you pretty much don't have any rules. Like, not that my parents didn't care, but just as long as I was doing what I needed to be doing, right. I could go to the fridge whenever I wanted. I could watch whatever I wanted on TV. I mean, my dad was so laid back as long as I did what I was supposed to do. And I'm in this place where, like, I can't even say the word yeah, and I'm trying to make sense. And so one staff member tells me I have to go everywhere with this one girl, and I can't leave this girl. And now there's a staff member in my face screaming at me saying I don't go anywhere unless you tell me to. And I was so confused. And so I just remember kind of looking at her, and I don't remember verbatim what I said, but I just said something kind of along the lines of, like, why are you yelling at me? Because I will not be yelled at. Right. And she snatches me out of the Victorian room and brings me through the chapel, through the hallway in the middle, into the dining hall, and she sits me down at a table, and she says, I know who you are, and I know what you are, and I'm going to prove it. And that's all she would say. She wouldn't answer any question that I had. When I would be like, what are you talking about? She's like, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm just, at this point, I'm like, am I like in a drug-induced coma? Like, am I really dead and this is hell? Like, what is going on? Right. Like, my 15-year-old brain didn't, for one, I didn't have any coping mechanisms. for two, I couldn't process what was happening. And so we leave the dining hall. She takes me back to my helper, and Friday night finishes. And in Faith dorm is where they take most of the new girls, unless it's full. She comes into Faith dorm. We're brushing our teeth, and she just stands there staring at me in the mirror while I'm brushing my teeth. And I'm just like, kind of looking at her, thinking like, is there a phone somewhere? Like, can I just call my dad and be like, hey, just kidding, I'm ready to be good now. Like, you scared me, haha. Like, it's really going through my head a lot that, okay, like, this was just to scare me. This is just people acting tough to scare me, like they send kids away to jail, you know? And so I finished brushing my teeth, and she's like, you need to get your things, and you need to come with me. And I'm just like, okay. And she's like, no, it's not okay. It's yes, ma'am. And I'm just like, yes, ma'am. So she takes me in Faith dorm. There's like there's two doors that lead to like a sitting room, and there's a big round table there. And she sits me down at the round table, and she says to me again, she says, "Are you gay?" And me being a scared teenager, I'm like, no. And she says, I know that you're gay. I'm going to ask you one more time. Are you gay? And I'm just like, no, I'm not gay. And she says, you know what? I know you're gay, and I'm going to prove it. And in my head, I'm thinking, how are you going to prove that I'm gay? Like,
Right.
How do you prove? Like, that's not, I mean, unless you give me like a lie detector test, that's not really something that you can, you know, it was just so mind-blowing to me.
Exactly. And I was going to say something. Didn't it just blow your mind that all the girls that are around your age are not doing anything, are not saying anything, and don't have a mind of their own, like a normal teenage girl? It was like the Twilight Zone. Everybody is on the same page here. No one is doing anything.
No one even said anything. My first night there, there was a girl who was pretty much always in trouble the whole time I was there, both times.
Uh-huh.
And I watched her be tackled onto the floor. They call it flooring. From like a running start, run and tackle this girl to the floor. And this girl's like this big around. There's two girls my age on top of her, and this girl was 13 at the time. Oh, they're on top of her, and I mean, she's smaller than you. Like, she's tiny. And they're on top of her, and then these two staff members, the one that I was having problems with, and one who was, I kid you not, easily over 300 pounds, all on top of her. And the girl's screaming that she can't breathe. And I'm looking around the dorm.
Because they're going to get in trouble. It's awful.
Right. And there's like probably 28 to 30 other girls in there my first time. And they're all going on with life as normal. Like, they're putting their clothes away. They're brushing their teeth. Nobody's even looking. And I remember looking at my buddier, and I said her name. I said, why is no one doing anything? Like, why are they doing that to her? And she just looked at me, and she was a very cool girl, but she was very fly below the radar. She always made sure she was compliant, and she just looked at me, and she looked like she was going to start crying, and she goes, "You'll get used to it."
Oh.
And I never did get used to it. It was never something that I was just like, oh, there she goes getting floored again. Like, it was always this feeling in my chest.
I'm surprised she didn't say she deserved it. She's rebellious. This is what, you know. So it was actually amazing that she was able to say that. That's how
there were a lot of girls who felt like if you got floored, you deserved it. If you got put in GR, you deserved it.
Exactly.
And a lot of them have come out of that now. But unfortunately, 9 years later, there are still girls from that school who adamantly believe that this place was God's gift to life, and that Christianity is that God is wrath, and you can't wear pants. And it scares me because I'm like, oh my gosh, like, if they have children, how are those children going to be treated?
If you feel like this is normal, if you feel like this is not abusive, and that whatever we're saying are a bunch of lies, that means you're for child abuse, but you don't know it. They don't know that this is child abuse. No clue.
Right.
Because they feel like they deserve it. So they'll say that you're lying. And it's really sad because we're telling the truth and they're in denial. And I've run into a lot of survivors that are unfortunately are on that brainwashed mode.
There were parents too that were, to a degree, either brainwashed or just clueless, because I remember even telling my dad on one of my visits, that I think it was my first visit, that I was just mind blown because these girls, that if he was asking me, like, what happens if you misbehave? What happens if this? And I told him, like, they will tackle you on the floor and they will drag you to the box. And my dad was just like, well, good. And I'm just like,
what? I don't think
that it registered. I think that in his mind, it's like a girl is throwing a glass against a wall or something, not, a staff member says, put this away, and you say, I'll do it in a minute. I mean, people were floored for things much less than that. Like, if I was a staff and I said, put your clothes away, and the student says to me, okay, I'll do that in just a minute, I have to finish writing this letter because there's a deadline.
Right.
They would be floored. It wasn't a joking matter. It was one of those things where you couldn't be right. You were never right. You could do everything by the book, how they said it, and they would still find a reason to come after you unless you were one of the favorite girls.
These are minor infractions, and they're punishing girls for getting a pencil, for maybe wanting to use their own mind and being nice and saying, hey, I'll do it later, no problem. And you can't think for yourself in this place, and that's really sad. Do you want to talk about the staff that wanted to prove that you were gay?
Sure.
Here you were. She sits you at a table, and she wants you to prove that you're not gay. What happened?
Yeah. So that night she just kept saying that she knew I was gay. She was going to prove it. My parents had told her that I was gay. Which at that time I'm just sitting there thinking, like, thanks, Dad. I think, like you said, I think that to my dad, it was no big deal because I wasn't raised to see color. I wasn't raised to see gender. It's never been a big deal, but
awesome.
To this woman, it was
family.
Yeah, they're pretty, honestly, they're pretty great. Like, we have come a long way over the past few years. But to these people, it was a big deal. And she just, for days, she would pull me out of school and question me again. And she would, we would have counseling sessions, which is how I think that they got off by saying they were therapeutic. They would pull us off at lunch and have counseling sessions where we could vent to them and then we get penalized for it. But she would pull me off at lunches and dinners and, are you gay? Are you gay? She did that for, I want to say it was 2 weeks. It might have been one week. I've kind of blocked a lot of stuff and it's coming back in pieces. But I remember it was either the end of my first week or the end of my second. We were at a Saturday night. Saturday nights were pretty much where all the dirty laundry in the school got aired. The helpers would write notes to the pastor's wife. Pastor, I use that term very lightly for anybody watching this. He was not a pastor. And all the girls would get in the chairs at the chapel and she would read off the helper's notes. And it would be like, so-and-so did this good. I want to make sure, because there were so many rules. So it'd be like, what is the rule about girls touching light switches before I write a demerit for someone, and then it would be pros and cons. And so the whole last part of that would be pretty much a whole list of everyone who had been bad, just literally getting rung through the ringer. Demerits would start getting written like crazy. There was one night that so many people got in trouble that the whole entire school got put on separation, and some of us were actually handcuffed.
Handcuffed?
Yeah, remind me. I'll tell you about that in a little bit. But after this Saturday night, this particular staff member, got up and said something about be careful about being deceitful. That was anything homosexuality was called deceitfulness. And so pretty much whenever somebody said that somebody else was being deceitful, we knew that it wasn't that they were lying about something, it was that they were gay. And she said something about deceitfulness and be sure your sins will find you out. Just a little bit of a disclaimer before this. From what's been brought to my attention, I am not the only girl that all of what I'm fixing to tell you has happened to. I'm not people because it's not my story, but I have gotten upwards of 7 names of other girls. After that Saturday night, I was extremely combative. Again, 15 years old. I've been in this place for a week now. I haven't been allowed to call my parents. I've seen a lot of things that I did not know how to. Listen, my dad was tough, but we were given hugs, and we were told good job whenever good job was due. And we were treated with a lot of human decency and respect. And in this place, that wasn't the case. And so it was very traumatic for me. And at one point I had demanded to call my parents and was told no. So by the end of Saturday night, I was in a rage. The staff member that weighs over 300 pounds liked to pick at the girls, like just salt in wounds. And so she had told me before that meeting, she said, hey, I got a letter for you from your dad. And I was so excited. And I was like, well, when can I have it? And I wasn't in any trouble. Right. And I was like, when can I have it? And she's like, you cannot have your first letter until you've been here for at least a month. What? And I'm like, well, why would you even tell me that I have a letter from him
if you're going to hold it?
If you're not going to give it to me, like, and you guys watching this, you have to understand that you're not allowed to call when you want to. So getting a letter it's more precious than the Bible. That is all you have of your family. And, so I was extremely combative and,
well, for good reason. That's so sad. It's awful what they did to you.
Yeah. I don't remember exactly what happened. But I just remember I showed out about something. Something had happened during that meeting, and I just got so mad. And there was a girl who was getting reamed out, and this girl had been in detention since before I had come into the picture. And the 300-pound staff member would just give her demerits. And you have to if you have 5,000 lines or more, you're in detention. But you can't get out of detention unless you write all of them. So it has to be back down to 0. So this girl would get so close. Like, she would get so close. And then this staff member would be like, demerit. Like, and not little 100-line demerits, but like, here's 500. Here's another 500. This went on for 6 months. And then whenever they pulled her out of the dorm, she was out of detention and off dorm silence in 2 weeks. No problems. So I remember I got so mad, and I slammed my fist onto my legs, and I just yelled at the pastor's wife, and I was just like, stop yelling at her, because I could not make sense in my head. Like, this girl is clearly having a hard time. Why are you making it harder? And so
you actually stuck up for somebody in the program,
which I learned very quickly not to do.
I'm almost afraid of what happened to you next.
That particular staff member that had been keeping a closer eye on me than most people stood up and came to me and once again grabbed me by my arm and snatched me up out of the chair. And she told me that she was taking me to the box. And I freaked out because, for one, the box is very dirty. I don't like dirty anything. I'm kind of a neat freak. I don't like dirtiness. And, we would get told stories of how girls would get kept there. It's about 4 to 5 hours until you get a bathroom break. So there have been girls that have peed on themselves in the box. It does not get cleaned up. It's just dirty. And
bowel movements too.
Yes. And vomiting. There's a lot. Some girls would beat on the wall until their hands bled. It just was nasty. And so, which, of course the blood and stuff gets cleaned up, but still, again, 15 years old. It's just not, in my head, it's just not adding up. And so she tells me that I'm going to the box, and I started fighting her, like not hitting her, but I snatched my arm away from her, and I told her, I said, no, I said, you're not going to take me to the box. You're going to call my father now. And so whenever I said that, I went to turn around to walk away from her, and she tackled me so hard that whenever my face hit the ground, it took, like, the only way I know how to explain it was my ears had this very high pitch ringing sound.
Oh my God.
And it took a minute for me to process what was going on. At my heaviest as a teenager, I weighed 150 pounds, and I was between 5'5" and 5'6". I was very, very small. And she just, linebacker tackled me. And immediately at the same time, she grabbed both of my arms and put them behind my back, and she was pulling my fists in an upward motion towards my shoulder blades.
What?
And I just remember going from, no, you're not going to take me there, to screaming, I can't breathe, because it was like I could get a shallow breath in, but my ribs couldn't move out. And she was sitting on my back. So she's got knees in my back, and she's got my arms pulled up, and she's pushing these pressure points right here. And she's, at the same time, she's pushing this, I don't even know where, there was this spot in my neck, and it would make me like move up. It just hurt so bad. And she wouldn't stop. And she did that. It felt like for hours. They told me after the fact that it didn't go for that long, but I know that I started having some numbness. Psychologists that I've talked to since then have said that it was a panic attack, or that something about the pressure points that she was hitting in my wrist. I guess if you do it the wrong way, it can cause damage.
Right.
And so I just remember feeling numbness, and I remember telling her that if she didn't get off of me, I was going to pass out. I was starting to see like little specks of glitter.
Oh my God.
And so she finally gets off of me, and her and another staff member had to pull me off the floor because my legs had totally gone to sleep. I couldn't like support myself. And they drugged me to the Get Right room. And the weird thing was, nobody was supposed to stay there overnight. So they kept me there overnight, and she had actually gone and gotten the pastor. Well, his wife had gone and gotten him. But he comes into the Get Right room, and at this point, I feel like I'm in the middle of a horror movie. Like, I feel like I have been kidnapped. I know that there's no way my parents know what's going on. And I'm irate. I'm screaming at the top of my lungs, and in my head, I'm thinking, I just want to knock them out and get out of there. But then at the same time, I'm thinking, if I get violent, they're going to call my parents, because that was one of my problems, was I was fighting a lot.
You're in a catch-22. You're damned if you don't. It's like the very thing that they're accusing you of being. How are you going to get out of this place unless you do it? You were tackled. You couldn't breathe. You were having a panic attack. You started seeing stars. Your legs fell asleep. They're dragging you to the Get Right room, or the box, the room of isolation, for those that don't know what we're talking about. And is it the pastor that comes the next day? You spent the night in the box. No.
He came that night. He came that night, and I was irate, for lack of better words. I mean, I was losing my mind. And by this point, I was stuck between a rock and a hard place, because I knew that I could fight my way out of that room. But it was like, okay, whenever I get out of the room, then what? Every door locks behind you. I don't have a code. They're going to call my parents. My parents are going to be like, see, this is exactly why we sent you away.
Right.
And at this point, there are phases that you go through whenever you are sent to places like this. So at first, you're in extreme denial. This is a joke. They're trying to scare me. They'll be back tomorrow, and tomorrow never comes. And then the next phase that you go through is this false sense of hope. Like, okay, if I'm good enough if I'm good enough for the next month or two, they'll see they made a mistake sending me here, and they'll come get me. And it's not because we're sent away, it's because we're scared. This is not a safe place for kids. And so the pastor comes in there, and I'm screaming because I know that the rule at school, whenever I went to normal school, was that if a teacher did something wrong, they were to call my dad that moment. Like, if it had to be taken care of, my dad would come take care of it. And my dad was one of those people that if I was in the right, he would fight to the death with me. If I was in the wrong, he would call me out right then and there. But if I was right, my dad would go to war. My mom was the same way. And so I knew if they call my parents, just call my parents. And my mom and I are close too. I just make reference to my dad more because I lived with him as a teenager. But I just kept screaming, call my dad. Just call my dad right now. Get him here now. Because my dad lived in Baker. So he was only like, I think, an hour or two away from the school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I just kept screaming, call my dad. Well, one of the staff members told me that they had called my dad and he was on the way. So while I'm waiting for my dad to get there, the pastor comes in and I'm screaming for him to get away from me because I don't know him. He put off this very strange vibe. Whenever he walked in the room, everything would get very dark, if that makes sense. Like, it just was this feeling of oppression and just...
Sure.
He was just... If the devil had a face, that would be him.
What we're fighting against is the dark.
Right.
It really is. And it doesn't surprise me that you saw darkness and the vibe that you got. You were saying, Dad's on his way. I'm surprised that they even said that.
Yeah, so they told me that my dad was on the way. And so the pastor comes in several minutes later. And I'm screaming for him to get away from me. And he looks at me. And at first, it was almost like he was going to be serious. And he gives me this look. And then he opens his mouth really big. And he's just like, could somebody come help me? Call my dad. And he goes, nobody's coming. He said, nobody's coming for you. He said, and even if we did call your dad, who do you think he's going to believe? He said, do you think that he's going to believe, what was it? Basically something along the lines of, did I think that he was going to believe a teenager that can't handle following the rules, or did I think that he was going to believe the pastor of this establishment, was what he called it. And he just sat there making fun of me, and he's like, I know who you are, and I know why you're here, and I've read your file, and your parents were begging us to take you, and just all this stuff, and it just was so overwhelming. I literally remember thinking that I literally wanted to die. Like, the program was a year, and I remember thinking, I'm not strong enough. I can't do this for a year. I just want to die.
And this is be a program that brings families together, and yet they're doing complete opposite and making the child feel that parents don't love them while being unloved in this program, which is awful. The psychological damage of this place is just horrifying. What year is this?
So my first stint was, so I know that I went home for the last time for my second stint the end of 2011 because I had my daughter in 2012.
Okay, 2011.
So I want to say this was, I want to say that I went in the beginning of 2010.
What I'm trying to convey to the audience is I've had several people say, well, they can't get away with this today. They can get away with this today. What happens when you come into the program? They take your cell phone. Because of today's technology, they always say, well, today's technology, they can't get away with this. Oh,
you have no technology.
These lockdown compounds. Could you tell me what happens to all of your things when you first arrive there?
Your phone immediately gets put in storage.
Do you have a camera?
Okay, so you can have the camera that has like the that you take the camera in and they develop it, but the staff goes through all your pictures and takes out ones that they don't think you should have. A picture of a girl being tackled and it got taken away. And then even things that your family sends you, most of the things they send, they don't even let you have, and they don't ever tell you that you have. And they're also very selective what things they give you back whenever you leave. I think the only thing that I got back was my cell phone whenever I left, and that was because my mom demanded it. Past that, I didn't get anything back.
So they're keeping girls' personal belongings for the most part.
Well, my mom and I had this thing
and making some more money off of the girl.
I think that it was more with me. I think it was covering their own skin. Because I had found out from my mom that letters that I was sending her were being blacked out. And so my mom and I had this thing ever since I was a little kid. Like if this was my mom's Bible, we would leave notes to each other in like the margin areas. And so I had taken my Bible that my mom had gotten me, and I had started documenting things because there's so many pages in a Bible. And so I would randomly, in random places of that Bible, I would like write a date and like so-and-so got floored and her face was bleeding, or so-and-so was in the box and this is day 7, or, this staff member said this to me. And I thought that I would get by with it. And whenever I went to go on my visit, the very last visit before my mom was like, nope, we're pulling you out of here. Whenever the staff member went through my Bible, she saw writing. She was like flipping through it to make sure I didn't have anything from any of the other girls because you couldn't have letters or bracelets they make you or anything like that. And she saw one of the notes. And so she wouldn't let me take my Bible with me on my visit.
Oh, wow.
And so anything that was paper was not returned to me. My mom called several times after I went home and asked because my great grandmother passed away while I was in Lighthouse, and she always did word searches. And so my aunt had mailed me the word search that she was working on whenever she passed, and it was like a book, and I finished it, and they wouldn't even let me have that back whenever I left because it was paper. And I think that it was because they were afraid that I had documented things in books and was going to use it to try to expose them.
Right. So they obviously know what they're doing is wrong because they don't want you to show it to your family. So they're hiding something. Isn't it awful how they always wanted us to be honest and not be deceitful? Not be deceitful, and yet here they are being deceitful. It's so sad.
We would be told things like that night that Pastor Cookson had me in the Get Right room and was mocking me the night that I was having the issue with the other staff member. He made the comment to me that my father, he asked me if I honestly thought that anybody outside of that building cared about me. And he said my father was paying $1,500 a month to keep me away from him. And which that night in itself,
to help you, but to keep you away from your father. What an awful thing to say to a child.
Yes.
Just awful. And he's supposed to be a leader of the church.
And it caused a lot of resentment for me. I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry, honey. Go ahead.
I was just saying it caused a lot of resentment for me towards my father. After I left Lighthouse, he and I did not start getting close. I left at 17 for the last time. And he and I did not start getting close until I was probably between 21 and 23. There was just always this space between us because I just...
there before you got into this place. So I really believe that this program put a wedge between you and your family.
The program was the nail in the coffin for a very long time.
Sure. Instead of helping families, they're tearing families apart. And some kids don't speak to their families anymore.
The night that we had the whole ordeal with him screaming back in my face and telling me nobody cared for me outside of this place, to my understanding as a new girl, no one was supposed to sleep overnight in the box. There's no bed. It's a very thin carpet over concrete. So it's very uncomfortable. And you sit there, like, your butt goes numb. And you kind of have to, like, stand up or, like, move around to adjust yourself. Well, I ended up being kept there overnight. And generally, whenever you're in the box, there's 2 girls that stay in there with you because it's during the daytime. So they do their schoolwork and they have their meals right there at the box. Well, they kept me overnight. And the staff member that stayed in the box with me was the same staff member that had been on my case since I got there.
Oh, no.
And at one point, they kept a table, like like the picnic tables that you can break down. It's like plastic top and has the metal legs.
Yes.
They keep that up against the door of the box. So if you picture, there's a wall, and then there's like a space that comes out and comes up and over like a door frame. And then in that, I believe the measurements on it is 6 by 6. So it's 6 feet high and then 6 feet wide. I don't know if I believe the 6 feet wide part, because I know that right now I'm only 5'7", and I couldn't completely lay down on the ground. So I don't think that it was 6 feet wide. But they would keep a table up against it to like keep you in. And there would be 2 people sitting there. Well, it was just her, and she was sitting there. She was still in school. So she was doing her paces. It's a ACE curriculum. And she would be writing something, and then she'd just look up at me. And she'd just stare at me for a minute. And then she'd go back to writing, and she'd look up at me, and she would just stare at me. And I am not a saint. I can be very spiteful. I can be very petty. And at this point, I went from feeling sad and like I want to die to where I was like, you know what? If I have to be in this place, I'm not conforming. And so one of the times that she looked at me, I was just like, what the F word are you looking at? And she looks at me and she snatches the table back, and she gets up and she walks. I'm sitting on the ground in the box, and she walks over there in front of me, and she squats down face to face with me, and she goes, "Are you gay?"
Oh my God. So she actually didn't say anything about you using FK, which is amazing to me, because in this place you couldn't even say the word pants or an artist, or
couldn't even say like darn it, like
Amy Grant. You couldn't say any artist name, and for you to say FK, she bypassed that because she had a different agenda. So what happened next?
She asked me if I was gay, and I told her no. And I remember us arguing back and forth. And then at one point, she gets down next to me, so she's not squatting anymore. And she goes, "I know that you're gay, and I'm going to prove it." And she grabs me by my legs, like my back was sitting up against the wall, and she grabs me by my legs and she pulls them straight out to where now, because I was facing the table, so now my feet are like kind of out of the doorway of the box. And she climbs on top of me and she starts very sexually touching me and grabbing me, and she did some very not okay things. And then once all of that, by technicality, I was raped by a female.
Oh my God.
It messed with me, and I didn't talk about it for years, because whenever she was finished, she got up and she had there was like a tissue box on the table that she had moved, and she got a tissue and she's wiping her hands off, and she goes, basically tells me that if I ever say anything, nobody will ever believe me.
Oh my
And
God.
then she says that that was to prove that I was gay because she was pretty sure that I liked it, and that basically that it wasn't wrong, that basically it wasn't wrong for her to do that, and it wasn't something that I could report because she was a female and I was a female, so that doesn't count as rape. And I asked on multiple occasions for a phone to call 911.
Oh my
and
God.
they would not give me a phone. So then I asked to call my parents, and they would not allow me to call my parents. So then I wrote a letter home explaining everything that had happened, and they literally made me watch them put my letter in the shredder.
Oh.
And then they made me write a whole different letter. And basically what I had to do was sit there with another staff member telling me what to write. Like, we played soccer today, even though I wasn't allowed to go outside because I was in trouble. Because whenever you get put in GR, you automatically get 5,000 lines. So I was automatically in detention. But I would have to say, like, oh, we played soccer today, and I did really good on my English test.
They're telling you to lie. They're telling you to lie.
I wasn't allowed to write about it. And after that moment, until the second time that I came back, that staff member made it's one thing to be sexually assaulted, which is still horrible and extremely hard to deal with, but she then proceeded to act for the next year like I was the most disgusting thing in the world to her.
Oh my God.
Like I was just trash. She would floor me every chance that she got. She would give me demerits every chance that she got. I went to the pastor and his wife at one point and was like, please, can you please get her away from me? And I don't know if the other staff knew about it, but I have these feelings that they did, because I asked the pastor and his wife to keep her away from me, and they told me something along the lines of not to make a big deal of things. And then whenever I came back into the dorm the next morning, they actually had two girls stay in the dorm with me so that I could sleep that day because I had been kept up all night that night. And the staff member in the dorm that was like over 300 pounds, she made a statement to me, basically along the lines of, I looked like I had a rough night. And it was just so weird. It was just like they knew.
They read your letter, which means they knew you were raped by this other staff member. They knew, and they shredded it. This is why we need oversight in teen programs. This is why we need oversight in residential programs. You said your parents were paying $1,500 a month?
That honestly could not have been Listen, we ate rotten fruit, rotten vegetables, meat that had passed its expiration date. Every Thursday was train wreck night. And train wreck night was where if we had casserole and green beans and ravioli left over, it all went into one pot. We got Suave brand shampoo and conditioners, unless our parents specially sent us something, but they paid $1,500 a month. And I've heard other girls say, well, I've seen receipts where my parents paid $2,000, and I've seen where and I'm not going to speculate, but there's no way that this money went specifically to this school, if that makes sense.
And we'll talk about the education in a minute, but that $1,500 is minimal, and it's on a sliding scale. So if your parents are an attorney or a doctor, it could be $5,000. It could be $10,000. It all depends. It's on a sliding scale.
If there is someone from CPS watching this, please listen very closely. Going in and asking these children questions is not enough. They're scared. They're not going to tell you anything. You need to observe. Are you not trained to know behaviors of children who are being abused? If it looks like a duck and it walks like a duck, it's a freaking duck. Do not be naive. Ask to see camera surveillance. We had cameras on every corner of everything. DCF never asked to see them. Never. All they would have to do is pull footage and rewind back to the next day, and they could have seen easily 3 or 4 girls get floored. No problem. And it wasn't like we were being restrained in a proper way. You know, people who are in prisons, the COs, they have classes that they go through to learn how to restrain someone without hurting them. This was not that. We were tackled like it was a full contact football game. They're asking the wrong questions, and they're asking the wrong people. And if you're going to ask these children these questions, then give them the security of knowing that because you value their life, you're not going to leave them there with those people if they tell you, because that's why they're not speaking.
Right. Exactly. And I also suggest taking them out of the compound altogether, because there's eyes and ears everywhere, and the whole place is bugged.
Yes. There were speakers on the ceiling everywhere that you went in that compound. There were speakers on the ceiling. And the interesting thing was, I started researching those after I was an adult. I just had this random memory of it and was like, I wonder, because the only thing they would announce was breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I'm like, I wonder if they could hear us,
sure,
through those speakers. And so I started looking it up, and it's an intercom system. Intercoms, it's just like whenever you're in school and somebody gets called to the principal's office and you hear it over the speaker in your class and they say, hey, Mrs. So-and-so, and Mrs. So-and-so says yes, and they hear you. It's the same thing. They're listening to everything you say. They're watching everything you do. Exactly. And they turn the other girls against you, because it's not that most of it is that they're brainwashed, and some of them are so scared that they're like, you know what? If I keep throwing these people under the table, they'll leave me alone. Right. They have like a quota.
It's a survival mechanism. Do you want to talk about the hierarchy level and how they train? Basically, these schools orchestrate other children to abuse other children, and it's not the child's fault. They're just in survival mode. But the way these programs are set up, that's why no one does anything. They're set up to abuse other children and bully other children. Do you want to talk about that?
So, do you want me to start with like the helpers, or?
Yeah, let's talk about the helpers. Let's talk about the buddy system. Let's talk about the helpers. Let's talk about the whole hierarchy plan. So they don't technically need adults to be in the dorms. There's eyes and ears everywhere, and it's the children against other children. They put the children against other children. So
there is a system to Lighthouse. So you have, it's all color coded, like inmates. So you have your new girls, which are your yellow shirts. You have your detention girls, which are your orange shirts, and detention is 5,000 lines or higher, and that sounds like a lot, but I promise you it takes 2 seconds, and they'll have you in detention. You have your pink shirts, which are your separation girls, and then you have your white shirts, which are pretty much just girls that are below the radar. They, maybe have 1,000 lines, but really nothing serious. Then you have what's called listeners. Really quick, girls who are in detention or on separation, they're literally not even allowed to speak. They're on something that's called dorm silence. You have to raise your hand. You stay with a buddy at all times. You have to raise your hand, and they will ask you, is it paper, pen, or potty? And if it's not paper, pen, or potty, you're not allowed to speak. There is no conversation. There is no, hey, how. They don't even celebrate your birthday. If you're in detention, there is no birthday for you. Nobody even acknowledges. It's just another day at the school. So with the listeners, nobody is allowed to have a conversation. Like, if you and I are girls at the school, I can't just walk up to you and be like, hey girl, how was your day? Like, did you have a good day? No, I have to say, hey, so-and-so, can you listen to our conversation? And they have to stand there and listen, and they'll be like, ooh, I don't know if you're allowed to talk, because so many things are off topic. You cannot even say, oh, I totally remember. Me and my parents went to that same Chick-fil-A one time. No, if it's not about the compound, you don't talk about it.
Right, and it doesn't, let's clarify with the audience, it doesn't matter what girl it is. whether you're the lowest on the totem pole or not. It's every single girl in this compound, no matter what hierarchy you are. You can't talk about the outside world. You cannot speak of the outside world. No movies, no TV, no radio. You can't even talk about the evolution theory. How about Edgar Allan Poe?
Oh, no.
Heavens, no.
That's a big one. That's a big no-no. You can't even say the word pants. I know we've said that a few times, but I just want you to let that sink in if you're listening, like how crazy that is.
It is crazy.
Anything, this is literally a cult. You either drink the Kool-Aid or they will beat it into you. It's not, you can drink it or take it by injection. Take your pick.
You could talk about God in the Bible and that's it. There's anything else is room for punishment.
But not just the Bible, their version of the Bible.
Right.
Because me now, I am a Christian. I believe in God. I believe in Jesus. I believe in the Bible. However, almost everything they taught was false doctrine. It was literally manipulated scriptures to fit their agenda. Exactly. And it took me years to even be able to step foot inside of a church. Because I thought God was a God of wrath and anger and hatred and just like, I was like, God is scary. God hates me. I don't want it. And that's not the case. It was just to fit their agenda because they ruled by fear. So you have your listeners. Okay. Then you have the helpers. Or no, you have junior helpers. Junior helpers, they can pretty much do everything that a helper can do. They're pretty much a helper in training. But everything that they do has to be verified by a helper. The helpers were basically the Judas of Lighthouse. And a lot of it was not their fault. Whenever you're put, I was made a helper at one point. I ended up intentionally getting myself in trouble because I got in trouble for not writing enough demerits because I felt like I should be able to come to you and say, hey, because there's 50 million rules, nobody's really 100% sure on what's a rule and what's not. So I feel like I should be able to come to you and say, hey, listen, Janine, I think what you said today was a little bit not okay. So maybe can you go apologize to that girl and just talk it out? I'll listen for you and just let's not let that happen again. That was unacceptable. I should have written you a 500 line demerit for being disrespectful. And if you didn't agree with it, then I should write you another demerit. And if I don't do that, I get demerits.
Exactly.
So I can get into detention for not writing girls up. It was not a choice. I could get floored for not writing you up. So you're put in a place where it's not that you're a bad person, but, you know, to the people who are listening to this, you have to think, would I want to be tackled to the ground? Like, I've bled from my face before from being tackled. Would I want to be tackled to that point?
That's awful.
Or would I just rather write this girl a demerit because technically she is wrong? And that's how you justify it. Well, you know, everybody knows that this is a rule. So I'm just going to go ahead and write the demerit just to be safe. They were the only people that were allowed to carry pens and papers and have a purse. Like, you could have one notebook and 2 pens unless you were a helper. If you were a helper, all bets are off. They were the favorite of the staff, and their job was to police you and go back to staff and report on it. And if they didn't, it could be detrimental to them. So
it's really sad to put a child in that position, and it's child abuse.
The worst part was that we weren't allowed to have friends. So we're put in a situation where you try going to sleep at night and you know there's 40 of you in the dorm and you hear a girl screaming at the top of her lungs, begging somebody to help her, staff members on top of her, helpers on top of her, and in your head you're thinking, if all of us jump on them at the same time,
right,
we can overthrow them, but then at the same time, we're just kids.
Right.
You know, and what I'm thinking might not be what you're thinking.
And how do you get out? That's really a fire hazard. What if there was a fire? You don't know the code to get out. You don't have the code. And it's not just the doors. I meant to tell you that earlier. It's also the windows. So the windows, they don't... I was going to ask you about the windows.
So the windows, they had sensors on them. So if you, like, here's where the window closes and here's what it closes up to, there's a sensor here and a sensor here. And if they move away from each other, even just a little bit, an alarm goes off, like a fire alarm. Not like a little fire thing, but like a loud, like in the middle of a grocery store kind of fire alarm. All the girls have to get up and stand at the edge of their beds, even if it's 2:00 in the morning. Like, there is no getting out. There is no getting away. And the very few times that girls did run away, the crazy thing was, somehow within about 4 hours, police would find them and bring them back. Meanwhile, these girls are kicking, screaming, talking about sexual assault, talking about being abused, talking about being forced to eat blended food, being forced to eat their own vomit, and police don't listen to you. They just take you right back, and there's not even an investigation.
That's so sad. How many reports do you think have been made on this program? And I know that Alexandra Zayas did a report and a full, thorough investigation on it, and then that's when parents started pulling their kids out. But
yes,
but no one was prosecuted. But how many reports do you think have been made? Countless?
There has to be hundreds. And here's the crazy thing, though. So, I finally gained the courage a couple weeks ago to call Santa Rosa County Police Department and file a report about my sexual assault. At first, I was told, absolutely, we're going to email you this paperwork. It was literally like a police report. I made a report, and because I'm so far away, they basically sent me like an email report. So I filled it all out. I submitted it to them, and they said, okay, we're gonna give this over to the prosecutors. And as soon as the prosecutor reads over this and signs it, we're going to go make an arrest.
Oh, wow.
So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, because, I was afraid like statutes of limitations, but they said, no, that wouldn't be a thing because she was in a place of power. And because this was literally a compound, I had no choice. There was no way away from her.
Well,
and so because
the other allegations that have been.
Right. Because of all of that, the statutes of limitations were not supposed to count. However, a few days ago, I was contacted and told that a case would not be made, that it was not going to be prosecuted because of how long ago it was. So even whenever girls do come forward and say, hey, something happened to me, it's swept right under the rug, like it never even happened. And there would be, whenever we would have fall festivals and stuff, there would be police officers and other church groups and stuff that came and would come do fall festival games and stuff with us. Nobody ever asked questions. Nobody cared to. We were in it. They didn't even come to play games with us. This school was the petting zoo of Jay, Florida. It was like, oh, look at these girls who are in lockdown. It wasn't like, hey, something might be wrong here. It was just, this place had its own rules. There was no law. The pastor and his wife and the principal of the school, they were the law. And there was no stopping them.
It sounds like you couldn't even make a report. You couldn't even make a report? Forget about trying to prosecute him for a second. Could you have just made a report?
They took my statement. Whenever I asked them if at least the report that I sent in was going to be documented, they told me somebody would have to get back with me about that. And this was, what, honey, a week ago?
Yeah.
This was about a week ago, and I still haven't heard anything.
That's ridiculous. I would get on them again.
Every time I call, I talk to the secretary, and then she sends me. She asked me to hold, and then she says she's going to connect me, and then I get sent to a voicemail. So I am, however, interested to see. I know that ACLU has been known to pick up on things, so I'm curious. I'm having a hard time getting through to them. I think because of all of this virus stuff and everything. But I have left a couple messages just letting them know that I would like to talk about fees, to sit down and let them hear my story and see if there's some kind of legal suit because these people have another school. They actually have two other schools. One was just shut down May 20th.
And they have a boys' home.
Yes, they have two. They have one in Couch, Missouri, and that's the one that they actually physically work at. And then they have like a sister or brother, I guess, school in Washington, but it was shut down. Actually, one of the staff, there was 3 staff members arrested. One was for sexual assault on a minor. Apparently, he was having inappropriate relations with one of the other staff members' minor children. And the statement that he gave, that the dean of this school gave, was that he didn't feel like anyone had done anything wrong. What? So, yes. So there were 3 staff members that arrested. What actually ended up happening was, I think it was 5 boys ran away. They stole a car. They went and stole, like, supplies from Walmart, like clothes, things like that. And they left. And they actually ended up getting stopped. For a little while, they got taken to a DJJ, a Department of Juvenile Justice. And now, to my knowledge, all of the boys, one of my friends, she's been in very close contact with the investigator on this case. And to my knowledge, all of the boys have been returned to their families. That school in Washington has been closed and is under investigation. However, the one in Couch, Missouri, where the people that I had to deal with, that school is still open. And we've tried calling CPS and trying to say, hey, look, you know, I used to have to live with these people. These kids are in danger. They won't talk to me. I tried calling the police department for that county. They told me that unless I had a child there who had been harmed, or unless I was being harmed myself, they would not go out there, which is strange to me because if I called the police right now and said, hey, I think that this public school is slapping kids, they would go investigate immediately. So it just kind of raises the question, is there more to this than what we know?
There is more to this than what we know. The difference between a school, a public school, is that parents aren't paying money. These boarding schools, parents are paying money. There's big money. There's big donations coming from all different angles. And that's the difference. And when there's money involved, corruption's involved. Yes. And I really believe that there is something going on here. And this pastor that had the lighthouse, it was closed down because Alexandra Zayas brought everything to the forefront, and parents started pulling out their kids, and it went belly up. Well, he didn't get prosecuted.
There are laws to protect schools like this. There are laws that protect these schools and say, oh, well, because they're Christian, this law doesn't count for them. That's something that I've been researching. I actually started looking that up about a week ago, and it's blowing my mind the more I read into it. Right. There are acts that protect these schools.
Sure. There are loopholes and, well, religious liberties. Well, I'm all for religious liberties, but we didn't say to abuse our children. So there should not be any exceptions to the rule. You can believe in Skittles for all I care, but that does not give you the right to abuse children. You don't have a right to abuse children. Across the board, child abuse should be illegal. But as far as I'm concerned, it's legalized in this country. If you allow these places to be open and they're making money and they're tax-free, shame on you, America. Shame on you. And
that is so true. And even the hospital that was out there, which has been closed for malpractice, and I know this because I actually tried to pull my medical reports right around the time that we started talking about doing this interview. I thought, well, I'll get my medical reports so that I could show those to you, and they're closed. I've had to submit a thing into Santa Rosa County. They've been closed for malpractice, but even there, my second time that I was sent there was
I never did ask you. You never told your parents. You never said what was going on in this place when you were out. You were in brainwash mode. Too scared?
Whenever I first came home, the first time that I came home, oh my goodness, yes. I was adamant I needed to go to an all-Christian school. I was adamant that I could not wear pants. I was adamant that I could not listen to anything but Southern gospel music. And it took me a couple weeks to get out of that. And then once I got out of that, I'm sorry?
Did your parents find that odd, or they just thought, oh, my baby's saved?
No, they thought that I was just this angel, like this, just greatness. And then I started making friends at the school that I was going to. My grades were very low, and my parents, to them, it was, oh, you're not applying yourself, you're not trying. And to them, it was never like, hey, maybe she has like some real deal depression. And it's crazy because all the adults in my family are nurses. So the only person who noticed anything was off with me the first time I came home was my grandmother. And she kept asking me over and over, is everything okay? But I never wanted to talk about it because I just kept hearing, like, no one's going to believe me. Right. No one's going to listen to me. And if they think I'm lying, they might send me right back. And I was there for a year and a week, my first time. So I was like, no, you are not sending me back for anything. Well, during the time that I was there, I dealt with, and I have dealt with a lot in my adult life as well. I've probably spent over $10,000 over the past 9 years in therapy, and bouncing from therapist to therapist until I could finally get it covered on insurance. And I'm actually 4 years sober. I dealt with a lot of addiction issues whenever I first got out, just because I couldn't deal. And still to this day, my husband wakes me up and he's like, you're screaming in your sleep, or you're fighting me in your sleep, and I can't sleep.
You're having post-traumatic stress disorder.
I do. I have clinically diagnosed post-traumatic stress. That's something I really don't talk about to a lot of people, but I do. I have clinically diagnosed post-traumatic stress. Oh. I have acute anxiety and social anxiety. And I also have I've actually gotten a lot better at them, but I also have some anger issues in relations to that. But whenever I first came home, I was brainwashed. And the more I would be around friends who lived in the normal world, because again, Lighthouse was its own world. There was nothing about the world that if you're watching this is Lighthouse. Nothing. And so it was like a culture shock. It's like whenever it's like if you moved from here to Africa and you didn't know the language, or you'd just be freaked out. And so for the first couple weeks, I was very much so to myself. And I would even lie to my parents. I would come home and they would be like, how was school? And I was like, oh, it was great. I made this new friend and this is her name. And I actually didn't have any friends. And a couple weeks after I came home, I started feeling like, okay, this Christian school is safe. The adults here are safe. And I started making friends. And my friends thought I was so weird, because I only wore skirts and I only listened to a certain kind of music. And one of my friends, actually, she's still my friend to this day.
These are Christian teenagers. Let's just emphasize to the audience, this place that we were locked in is not Christian. It is an extreme cult. And if they thought you were out of whack,
and they thought I was off my rocker. My friend, she sat me down one day and she goes, she said, why is it that you feel the need, because there was this boy who was yelling at us it was like a lunch break, and I just sat there very quietly, and she asked me why, and I said, well, because I saved pictures from one of the classes that we took about dating just so I could show you. So I have it. Whenever you want it, let me know. But
Oh, wow.
I told her, I said, well, women aren't supposed to speak out to men. And it's unattractive, and you'll never get a husband that way, because I was conditioned in Lighthouse that my goal in life was to be a wife, have children, keep up with the house, and shut my mouth. And she's like, no, absolutely not. Like, this is not how life goes. And so the more I hung out with her, the more I started to find my voice again. And with finding my voice came a lot of anger, because things started connecting in my mind, and things started coming back from Lighthouse, and I started getting so angry. And my parents, when I would try to talk to them about things, or I would try to hint to things with them, they would just get so upset with me, and they would talk about, well, the staff did so much for me. My parents actually wanted me to call. I would call back to the school periodically to talk to the staff and see how they were, and see how things were at the school, because to them, they were fooled into believing that this place was God's gift to earth. And so
it saved a little girl, and little did they know it traumatized the hell out of you, and completely physically, emotionally, and spiritually abused you. So you were calling in at the school. That's terrible.
Yeah, and whenever I would call, they wouldn't, if I asked about another girl, they wouldn't tell me anything about her. They were very vague, and they would say things like, make sure I'm behaving, or they'll end up seeing me again sooner than later, and just stuff like that. So 3 months went by, and in the course of this 3 months, depression is an understatement. And I think what a lot of people don't understand is depression is not always the sad, mopey, hood pulled up, curled up in a blanket crying. Sometimes depression is just straight up rage. And that is what I felt. I felt like nobody understood me. I felt like I was alone. That's the only way I know how to explain it. I felt so alone. And I kept thinking, like, oh my gosh, I busted my butt for a year to get out of this place, and now I'm always there. And I even feel like that, like, my husband has heard me say before, like, I'm always going to be there. I'm never going to go home. I'm always going to be in Lighthouse.
Prisoner in your own mind, but the Lighthouse, it's just Victory rebranded, is in your head 24/7, and it's haunting you.
Lindsay went to Lighthouse not by our choice. Lindsay went to Lighthouse because we had no other choice.
I went in thinking that it was a nice place, and it was completely opposite. My freedom was taken from me. My voice was taken from me. I couldn't call somebody if I needed help.
She has gone through things that I can't even comprehend. And to hear her describe some of those things is very difficult.
You might even say I had been dealt a bum steer.
We take
students that are from the world system, and we show them how that they can live conservatively. God actually put the program together. We're teaching His Word, and that never changes.
How is life treating you?
Many of these youngsters who are coming in having already been traumatized, already feeling pretty worthless. Now they're feeling rejected even more by their parents because they're sent to the programs. That's not to say that they're the angels who haven't done anything wrong, but they are youngsters who need some nurturing, they need some positive guidance, they need some caring and support.
My daughter, she was a very sick little girl. She had extreme violent tendencies. I don't mean anger outbursts. She had very violent tendencies.
The Times spoke with a dozen recent students who attended the Lighthouse of Northwest Florida, who described a form of discipline and control in which girls physically restrain other girls. They call this flooring. Lindsay Brooks says she was sat on by 6 to 7 other girls. Others recall her being floored frequently for extended periods of time.
It was literally like I was not there. They sat on me like I was their mattress and they were having a slumber party.
The students also described being sent to the Room of Grace, where they were secluded almost every waking hour for days.
It's just a place for them to calm down, and that's what it's for, the de-escalating, to be able to have the therapeutic rapport that needs to take place to help them. If the prisons say that it works, then why wouldn't we? Some choose to hit the wall, but we took the drywall out and put on some press board so that they don't damage the wall.
Well, it's incredibly abusive. It's absolutely, totally inappropriate, totally excessive.
I'm so honored to be your mom.
I'm honored to be your daughter, Mom.
And I'm so sorry you went through this.
It's okay.
The private non-profit group that accredits Lighthouse investigated after the Times visited and says it forbid the school from keeping girls secluded for so long.
We need to prohibit some of the abusive practices that take place. It's more than just licensing. It really has to be monitoring of it and enforcement. And if you don't, then even well-intended people and well-intended programs can go awry.
It doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
Every day is a step in the process.
Like a boot camp, concentration camp, a cult, all intertwined, and this was all in the name of God. And I was actually a strong Christian before I went into this place, and I was made to feel like an untouchable. And when I got out, I felt like I couldn't even fit into society. I was locked in there for 8 months, and the first month was enough damage. I was already damaged after the first month of being in there. But we just didn't have any rights. We couldn't speak. We were threatened to eat our own vomit. We were told that we couldn't get off our bunk beds, and if we got off our bunk beds to use the restroom, we would get a demerit, which is a punishment. How could you punish a child for going to the bathroom? This is just illegal, and I don't understand why we have these places open today.
They need our help.
They shouldn't
So
be
it surprised
open
you
at
to
all.
know, because it surprised me, that tens of thousands of kids all across America are being treated worse than we ever treat a prisoner, an adult prisoner behind bars, and these are kids who've committed no crimes.
Yeah. I got to where I wasn't sleeping very much, and I don't think that my parents actually knew that. My parents had gotten me, this was back in the, early 2000s, but they had gotten me an Apple iPod Touch. And so it's like an iPhone, it just has to have Wi-Fi to work. And so I had downloaded texting apps, and I would stay in touch with my friends on those texting apps. And so I would be up all night, either listening to music or watching videos or YouTube. I didn't want to sleep. And so I got into this state where I couldn't tell the difference in what was real and what wasn't. And so I started being very hostile. And there would be things that people would say to me that would just, at the time I didn't know it was PTSD, but it would
trigger.
My dad would say something to me, like trying to correct me, and it would just throw this 180 in my mind, and I would be ready to fight him, and I wouldn't even be able to tell you why. And to my dad, it was just too much. So we got into an argument about 3 months after I had gone home. We got into a huge argument about my grades, and to me, if my kids' grades are slipping, the first thing that I'm going to think is, wait, like, is something wrong? Like, you know, and maybe it was because my grades had been bad since they divorced. But I mean, in Lighthouse, I had all A's. My grades were through the roof, and now my grades are, you know, falling off. And so we get into this big, huge argument because to my family, and even to me, education is a huge deal. And, I don't remember what all was said, but me and my dad had it out, and I just thought, you know what? I can't do this anymore. I had just turned 17. I was like, you know what? I only have less than a year until I turn 18. I'm leaving, and I'm not coming home. And so I did. I went to my high school boyfriend, who is now actually my ex-husband, and I told him, I said, I'm not going home tonight. And he's like, well, where are you going to go? And I said, I don't know, but I'm not going home. And so we actually ditched our backpacks in a trash can, which honestly, now that I'm a parent, that is probably the biggest regret that I have as an adult, because my parents thought someone like picked us up. Like they thought someone picked us up and threw our backpacks in the trash can. And so if there's one thing I could undo, it would be that, because we were gone for, it was either 3 or 4 days, and my parents were horrified. Like, I mean, what would you think? You know, your kid's gone, and this is a time where kids are so easily picked up.
Right.
And so whenever I finally called my dad and told my dad where I was, the cops came and picked me up and took me back to my dad's house. My stepmom and I got into a huge fight. And it actually started a physical altercation between me and my father, because she had a newborn, and she picked him up, and she had a glass of water in her hand, and she threw the glass of water all over me. And she was like, don't worry, sweetie, you're not sugar, you won't melt. Because I was being very hostile with her. I do just want to make that clear. I was being extremely hostile with her, because she was like, you know, we were so worried about you and this, that, and the other. And at the time, I was too young to know what mental health issues were. But that's why I didn't care. It wasn't that I was just this a-hole kid that didn't care about anything. It was just that I was so traumatized. Even now as an adult, whenever, like, my husband and I went to DC yesterday, we had a beautiful day. I had to keep reminding myself, this is real. Because in Lighthouse, I would let my brain go to a happy place. And that was my reality. Those were my memories of me on the beach with my brother, or, you know, somewhere else. And so I had a hard time determining reality because of that. And so,
because you were escaping to survive. You were escaping mentally to survive.
And she would get so upset because I would just go blank-faced, like zero emotion whenever they'd start yelling at me. But it was because I just checked out. Like, I just mentally could not handle being yelled at anymore.
Right.
And so she threw the glass of water in my face, and I just remember saying something to her about, you know, put the baby down. I think I cursed at her. And that, she's honestly a very sweet person, so I think that for her it was the heat of the moment, you know, and I had been gone, and there's just a lot of emotion, and it caused a physical altercation between me and my dad. My mom got to my dad's house, her and my aunt, and your stuff, you're coming home with us. And so I start packing my things, and I was very, very intoxicated that night. Pretty much from the time that I left the first time, I started abusing narcotics. because it was the only time that I felt normal.
You have already stepped your emotions down already by being at this place, because at Victory Christian Academy and the Lighthouse, you weren't allowed to express your feelings. And you had to put it all down and suppress everything.
A lot of that night, I do not remember. And I'm sorry, I laugh at weird times because it's kind of just my coping mechanism. So it's not that I think it's funny. It's just...
You're fine. I get it.
I feel. But I had stepped out, and I call my aunt my sister because she and I were pretty much raised together. She's my mom's sister, but she's like 10 years older than me, and she pretty much lived with me and my mom from the time my parents split on through my life. But she came outside with me, and she and I were actually leaned up against my mom's car smoking a cigarette, and I was out of it. And she looked at me, and she's like, something about she was going to go inside because my mom was packing my things, and she was going to go inside and see how much longer it was going to take my mom, because at this point it was like I want to say after midnight. It was late. And she comes back outside and she goes, "Run right now." And I just kind of looked at her and I said, "What?" And she said, "Run now." She was married to a guy named Michael, and she said, "You need to run right now." She said, "I'm going to call Michael and have him pick you up. Just hit the woods and go." Whoa. And I said, "Why?" And she said, "They're going to send you back." And I said, "Leanne," I said, I can't run anymore. I said, I've been running for over a year now. I can't, I just didn't have it in me anymore. And so I told her, I said, "There's no way they're going to send me back." I said, "Mom's packing my stuff up. Mom's going to take me home." I said, and I was crying in the front yard. I said, "For once, I just have to do the right thing." And my mom came outside. Oh my gosh, it wasn't even 5 minutes later. She came outside with my dad, and they said that they were going to go put fuel in my mom's car, and we were going to take a ride and all talk, because me and my dad we've had it out before, but never as bad as we did that night. And I feel bad still about that, because I feel like if I hadn't have been intoxicated, it probably wouldn't have escalated to what it did. Because I don't want this to paint my dad in a bad light. He's not a monster. He's a great guy. Right. It's just that whenever you have a teenager that's like, "Yep, I'll fight you," what are you supposed to do? You know, you're not going to just sit there and let your 17-year-old beat up on you. So,
what you need was therapy. You needed therapy after Lighthouse.
Yes.
Some serious therapy. And if your parents didn't want to talk to you about it because they were in denial, have a therapist talk to you about it. But unfortunately, that's not what happened.
They told me that we were going to go to the gas station. And by that time, my mom's mom actually came to my dad's house, and she was there. And my aunt and my grandmother were very furious with my stepmother, and they were all having their own little argument in the kitchen. And we got in my mom, my dad, and I got in my mom's car. And at first, my mom was driving, and my dad was sitting up front, and I was sitting in the back. And we went to the gas station, and I want to say that on the way to the gas station, I wouldn't talk to my dad. Sorry. But then when we got there, I went to open the door to do something, and I realized that the child safety locks were on the doors.
Oh.
And so then I just remember it hitting me. They had planned to take me back before my mom ever even left to come get me.
Oh, no.
So, because she hadn't gone back out to her car during this time. Like, while they were in talking and while me and my sister were outside, my mom never came back outside to her car, and the child safety locks were never on in my mom's car. So, my mom puts gas in the car. My dad comes and gets in the back seat with me, and I mean, we fought like cats and dogs the whole way there. And I was very belligerent. I was very intoxicated. By this point, my addiction had gotten pretty bad. And whenever we got there, the same staff member that sexually assaulted me, the leader of the cult, so the pastor, and a new staff member was waiting for me outside. And they were all smiling and happy, like they were so excited to see me again. And they're like, "Hey, how are you?"
Just
you know?
Right.
Come on in. Let's get you your new girl shower.
They want the paycheck. They want their paycheck from your parents, of course. Smiles, everyone. We're on Fantasy Island. Okay, so then what happened?
The rest of it is very hazy. I remember giving them a very hard time. My second go there, I didn't care because I was like, you know what? I have 10 months until I'm 18. Do your worst. Whatever. I'm fighting you every single step of the way. I didn't care anymore because I felt like between all of the times that I got floored, all of the times that I got hit, all of the times that I got fed blended food because I couldn't eat something that they served, the sexual assault, they had already taken everything away from me. And they knew that. They had taken, I was already broken when I went there the first time. They just took what was left of me and just sucked it out of my body and enjoyed it. And so the second time I was there, I thought, you know what? That's cool. We'll do this again. We'll give this another go. Cool. Bet. So I go in to do my new girl shower. And this time I was extremely combative because the same girl who did my first new girl shower was in there. And I told her, I said, you're not leaving the shower curtain open this time. And so I kept closing the shower curtain. Every time she'd open it, I would just snatch it back closed. And so I got floored in the shower. I actually got my head smashed into the side of the shower wall. There's a mark, actually. Mm-hmm.
Wait, slow down here. You got tackled in the shower and there was a mark left behind?
On the shower wall, yeah. Because I kept closing the shower curtain. And this was at like 3 o'clock in the morning from what one of the other girls had told me. Because whenever I woke up the next morning, I thought it was a dream. I mean, I thought that I had gotten so out of it. And then whenever the lights flipped on and I looked around, I just panicked. So from there, that the first morning I felt kind of okay. I had never gone through withdrawals before. But the withdrawals hit me probably right after breakfast time.
Oh, no.
And at first, it was just like, I felt a little bit achy. You know, I thought maybe I was coming down with a flu or something. And so I had told a staff member, like, hey, I'm really not feeling well. And the weird thing was they did medicine call for us. There was no nurse. So if you were prescribed a certain medication, you only got it if they agreed with it. We had autistic girls that were there that were prescribed Adderall that did not receive it because it was against. They were not allowed to have their medication. And then they would be floored for being out of control. But they couldn't help it. And so I went to medicine call that morning and I said, look, I need a Motrin or something. I don't feel good. And it was the same staff member. And she's like, well, if you wouldn't have been so, fighting me last night, you'd feel fine. So go on to school. You're fine. Okay. And I got into the classroom and I sat down and I was fixing to take my placement test to start school again. And I threw up everywhere. I just lost it. And from there, I started having cold sweats. My fingers, by the end of the day, my fingers had totally drawn up and I was like this in my bed. And I stayed there for 4.5 days. It was either 3.5 or 4.5 days. Well, one of the girls came into the dorm on the last day that I was in there. They kept refusing to let me call my parents again. And my mom says that she never even knew about any of this.
Oh my God.
That one of the girls comes into the dorm and she runs out and I don't know if I couldn't open my eyes or if I couldn't see anything because that's how sick I was. And normally by day 3 or day 4, the withdrawal should be about over now, but I was a very heavy user. So one of the girls goes running out of the dorm screaming that she thinks I'm not breathing, like she thought I was dead. And so a staff member comes in and they're like, oh my gosh, call 911. Let's get her. They took me EMS to the hospital and the same staff member rode with us. Oh, and so whenever we got in there, the hospital made the staff member leave. And while she was treating me, I told her, I was like, please call the police. I told them that my parents had made a mistake. I told them that, we were being abused, that we were being sexually abused, that things were going on that shouldn't be going on, that we were being tackled. And she wouldn't even make eye contact with me.
Oh my God. And this is, wait, this is a nurse or a medical doctor? Who is this?
Both.
What?
This was both. I tried talking to the nurse and I tried talking to the physician's assistant because we didn't see a doctor. We saw a physician's assistant. And neither one of them would listen. And then they brought her back in the room. Also,
they're in on it. They're pretty
right.
much in on it.
While I was at the hospital, the pregnancy test that they gave me came back positive. My family was never notified.
Oh my God.
So, a few weeks later, definitely more than 2 or 3 weeks later, I got into trouble because I was angry because the pastor's wife refused to let me get prenatal care. She said that this child was illegitimate. Mind you, this woman and her husband had their first child. She got pregnant when she was 12 and delivered when she was 13. So this same woman who had a child way younger than me basically told me that my child was the result of sin, and that if I was meant to have this baby, then I would have a healthy baby, and that was up to God. It was God's will.
Oh my God.
So I was refused prenatal care.
That's not for her to judge. It's your body.
Right. So I was refused prenatal care. Well, I ended up getting into trouble because I lost my mind. I got so mad. And I was like, something could be wrong. We don't I was a teenager. I didn't know what to expect. I had never been pregnant before. I didn't know what to do.
Right.
And so, let me rewind. So my pregnancy test came back positive, and the hospital literally told the staff member that if they wouldn't have brought me in, I probably would have died because my withdrawals were so severe.
Oh my God.
They gave me at the hospital, which the staff members were very, very against. And then they recommended that that they gave me a prescription for a clinic. I guess it was a prescription. It was like a referral to a clinic, and said that I needed to go there at least 3 times a week, and that they would help dose me down. I was never allowed to go because it was against their religion. So whenever I got back from the hospital, I went through another series of detox because they gave me at the hospital.
It's not good for the baby, but
Right.
excuse my ignorance too, when they're trying to wean you off of it, as they were trying to do, and then this lighthouse was against it, that's got to be harmful to the baby too.
Yes. Well, they even tell you in pregnancy, if you smoke cigarettes and you find out you're pregnant, you're not supposed to just quit cold turkey. Even something as small as cigarettes can trigger a miscarriage.
Right.
You're supposed to dose down because even though you didn't know you were pregnant, you were. And now this child, this fetus is used to getting these drugs. And so now it is also dependent.
It's not just affecting you, it's affecting the baby.
Right. Yes. And so it's dependent as well.
To give you these drugs, they're weaning you off, and it's actually better in the long haul versus quitting cold turkey and then having it be traumatizing.
Right.
On a level.
So, a few weeks later, they tackled me for losing my mind.
You're pregnant?
They tackled me. And
I was going to ask about the slavery, but we'll get into that too. Because I was going to say, while you were pregnant, were you forced into slavery too? But they tackled you. That's awful. That's blunt force trauma.
Well, while they knew that I was pregnant, I worked in the kitchen. So all of the girls, they do the cooking, they do the cleaning, they do the laundry. We do everything. The staff really just kind of stands around and supervises.
They're really profiting off of this because they don't have to pay for someone to clean this place.
And we would have missionaries come stay with us that we had to cater to their families. So I got put in the laundry room in the kitchen because at first I was in laundry, but it was so hot in there. I couldn't handle it from the big dryer. And then whenever I told them it's too hot for me in the laundry room, they put me on yard work in Florida. And I'm like, and even the guy that did yard work, he's like, you know, she can't work out here with me. She's going to pass out. So they put me in the kitchen. So, I mean, it was first trimester, so it really wasn't that exhausted being in the kitchen. The only thing was the smells would make me sick. And none of the other girls were allowed to know that I was pregnant. I was not allowed to talk about my baby. And my family was never notified.
That sounds so Christian, doesn't it?
I was told that it was because my child was illegitimate. So because I had an illegitimate child, I couldn't talk about it to any of the other girls. My family was never notified. Whenever I brought this up to my mom a few weeks ago, she was floored. And she's like, what do you mean whenever you were pregnant in Lighthouse? And I was like, I always thought she knew. And she said they never told. She said that she called the second time that I was there. She called several days in a row, and they told her that I was down sick with strep throat.
What the hell? So they lied.
Yes.
Isn't it a sin to lie? They preach that to us all the time, and yet what are they doing? They've been lying left and right. That's why this place, this is demonic.
So I got tackled, and
can you explain how you got tackled again? Just now you're pregnant. This is
sure
here.
So
you were tackled before in the shower, and the second time around you were tackled. You were pregnant. They didn't know about it when you were in the shower, but still, they should not be tackling girls anyway. Okay, and this is why. Someone could be pregnant. Someone could have health issues. They didn't know it, but this time they did. This time.
Oh, there were autistic girls there was an autistic girl there that would be restrained for hours. I mean, we would leave to go to breakfast and she was on the ground being held down, and we would come back from school and she's still on the ground in the exact same position.
That's awful. So what happened to you? Did they throw you on the ground being pregnant?
So it depends on the staff member that does it. The staff member that had it out for me, she would just go for me. A lot of the other staff members, they would run up behind you and grab you by the back of your neck and push you to the floor. So it's the only thing I know how to compare it to is like a body slam. They just like slam you down to the floor, and then they jump on you and they always do that thing where they pin you up and they push on your wrist. And if there's more than one staff member, then while one staff member is hitting pressure points on both wrists, the other one is hitting something like in between your neck and your shoulder that's like cringing you up. The staff member that tackled me did the behind the neck thing, but he also put a foot in front of me. So it knocked me down, and they held me there for a very long time.
Oh my God.
After that, I got sent to the box, and I kept telling the two girls, here's the thing, in the box, you're not allowed to talk. So if you talk to the girls who are watching you, they'll just pretend like you're not talking. So I kept telling them, I need you to get a staff member. I'm cramping, I'm hurting, and I'm not supposed to be. And I was scared to tell them why I'm not supposed to be, because I'm not allowed to talk about the fact that I'm pregnant.
Oh my
God. And so I kept saying, you need to get a staff member, I'm cramping. And finally, I looked at the girl and I said, look, you need to go get a staff member now. I am pregnant. I am in my first trimester, and I am in so much pain. You need to go get someone. So then she jumps up and runs and goes and gets staff. Well, I got demerits for telling her that I was pregnant. And they continued to make me stay in the Get Right room. They never took me to get any kind of medical care. They never took me to get checked out, nothing. I started spotting that night. By the next day, I was heavy bleeding. And then a couple days later, being 17, having never carried a baby before, I passed something that looked very strange to me. Oh. And so it was on the toilet paper. And so I had my buddy go get the staff member, and I showed her, and she went and got the pastor's wife, and the pastor literally told me that because my child was illegitimate and because I was sinful and couldn't behave, my baby had died.
And it's nothing to do with them slamming you down to the ground. Excuse me, I'm going to have to bleep that out. But unbelievable. Unbelievable. It's God's will. Give me a big call for that miscarriage. Victory Christian Academy and the Lighthouse in Florida caused your miscarriage. I'm sorry.
And they covered it. They covered it up. They never told my parents. And again, I wasn't allowed to write home about it. Anytime something bad happened, if you tried to write home about it, they just ripped it up, threw it away, and made you write another letter. Or they put it in the shredder. There was no talking about it. And the sermons that they would preach, we were Jezebels, which is basically a biblical term for a whore. We were harlots, which is a biblical term for a whore. You know, we were always treated like we were so disgusting.
Right.
Like there was no good in us. And, you know, even if you got saved, which was nothing like what salvation really is, there was no surviving. There was no safety. And I mean, my last stint that I was there, I can't tell you how many times I actually got in trouble because we had a helper that was so brainwashed that it was not even funny. And right after I had the miscarriage, she just kept getting in my face. And she's like, well, what are you going to do about it? I'm a helper. Do something, do something. So I punched her in the face. Like, I just lost it. I was like, I'm over this. I'm done. Several staff members jumped on top of me. I got dragged to the GR room. The next morning, whenever they were dismissing from chapel, she walked past me. And just the fact that she looked at me triggered me so hard that I jumped on her again. And I went right back. And that time, that was the time I was in GR for like 3 weeks straight. So it was, yeah, it was, you eat in the get right room. You're not allowed to do schoolwork.
Are you listening to the sermons played over and over and over again? Let's create a picture for the audience. Was it Lester Roloff?
Sermons,
or it was, well, Lester Roloff is dead. Was it the other preacher from A Living Hell that was?
There were both. There was some that were Lester Roloff, and those ones were basically how terrible we are, how disgusting us and our sin is, and how we're an abomination to God, and we have to get it together.
Now it's 24 hours as opposed to twice a day. Twice a day with the sermons, and then the rest of Victory Christian Academy and Lighthouse was just negative reinforcements from helpers and staff and everybody else.
You guys only had the sermons twice a day?
We did.
Girl, y'all had it good. So on a weekday, we had, in the morning before school, we had chapel right after breakfast. After PE, we had chapel again, and then before we went to bed.
We had it twice, and then there were also Bible studies that another pastor would do with us too.
Gotcha.
So we had that as well, but everything was just negativity all day long. I need to go back to this miscarriage. Let's just reiterate to the audience that you did not have any medical whatsoever after this miscarriage. I mean, after a miscarriage, you're in pain. There could be other medical complications that you don't know about.
They took me close to a week after the miscarriage. They took me back to J Hospital. What I don't understand is,
why did they wait a week? Why do you wait a week?
Well, you had to schedule it. You had to schedule it with the pastor's wife, and she had to pick a date. Like, there was one girl that had a kidney infection that was so bad she couldn't walk.
Not the procedure. Why did they wait a? I'm sorry, I'm mad at them.
Oh, that's just literally anything from a medical standpoint. You had to wait until they said they would take you,
which is it's beyond ridiculous. It's cruel. It's cruel how they did that to you and made you wait a week, and they caused that miscarriage, and that's probably why they didn't want you to see a doctor right away.
Well, what was crazy was whenever I went to J Hospital, the staff told the nurse that I saw that I had a miscarriage and I needed to have a DNC. And so as a teenager, I really didn't think much about it. I had never been pregnant before. I had never had a baby before. I didn't know how this worked. But there's a certain distance into your term that you have to be to need a DNC because your body passes it naturally, which mine had. And so the DNC is to make sure, I want to say that it's like 15 weeks and up, and I wasn't that far along. I was very early for first trimester. What I passed was like a very strange looking blood clot that just had more to it than just that, if that makes sense.
Right.
So they did a DNC on me, even though everything had already passed. And now, to this day, I have feminine health issues. I have extremely abnormally painful periods, to the point where sometimes I have to take narcotics or equivalent to narcotics to be able to stand up and walk. I have intimacy issues from it, because it sometimes can be painful. I've had problems with my ovaries that I'm not sure if it's linked or not.
You were talking about the circle, Pope and Amanda, and how the similarities are. And I interviewed Amanda, and they're all Lester Roloff programs. But even if it's not a Lester Roloff programs, it's all the same thing. They're scare tactics. They're abusing our children. They're sex trafficking. On our particular ones, Roloff is the mastermind. He started a Roloff school called the Rebecca Home for Girls in 1968. It was New Bethany. It was the Hephzibah House, a Victory Christian Academy, the Lighthouse, Genesis by the Sea. They're all interconnected. And I'm trying to think if there's, oh yes, the Circle of Hope. Those are all Lester Roloff schools.
Now, the Rebecca house that you were just talking about, we actually, as we would approach 18 years old, they would tell us that that was a school for girls who were 18 and older, that basically they would take us to court and they would prove in court that we were incapable of living on our own.
Oh my God.
And that was a scare tactic that they used, that we would be forced to go to this place and live there as an adult. Sure, I've never been able to find any proof on it either way. I've never been able to find anything on it as a girls' school, and I've never been able to find anything on it as an adult school. But we would be told around the time that we were 17 that basically if we didn't get our act together, we were going to go to that home. And that they would, because I challenged it one time. I was very inquisitive my second time. I was very bucking the system. At this point, I didn't care anymore.
Right.
And so they would threaten me with that place. I'm like, yeah, how are you going to send me away when I'm grown? Like, you can't even keep me here when I'm grown. And they would be like, well, we'll take you to the court and prove that you're mentally unstable. And finally, I told the head guy one day, I said, that's fine. We can go to court. I'm okay with that. Because when you take me to court, I'm going to tell them everything you do.
Oh.
And so at that point,
I think you're a spitfire. Good for you.
At that point, he no longer wanted to threaten me with that. It was no longer a tactic that they wanted to use on me. So I'm not sure if it was a real place or not. However, I do know that they didn't want to take me to court anymore.
I think there is a place like that. I was on the Hammer podcast, and we were talking about the Rebecca Home for Girls, and we were talking about the Lester Roloff programs. And he had mentioned that in order for them to be legal, is they have 18 years and older, but you have to commit yourself to one of them. But you can walk out at any time, but you're paying money. You're paying them money, and you're giving away all your possessions. So he did mention, the Hammer podcast did do some research on that, and you may want to listen to the Hammer podcast. Anderson Cooper did a thorough investigation on the Hephzibah House, and it was open years and years after that investigation. And DPS, police reports, it's the same bat channel. Open for 5 decades. How the hell can we allow child abuse to go on and knowing it is existing for 5 decades after all those girls have made reports?
They had an opportunity to help thousands of girls. And they used that to more or less treat us how they were probably treated, and to put us down and to hurt us, to make themselves feel like they were something.
Right.
And that's the sad part about it. Be careful. If you honest to goodness feel, before you send your kids away, give them a year in therapy. You're not going to see change in the first month. It's going to take time. Give them a year in therapy. If it doesn't work, then consider sending them away, but do your research. Read the reviews and pay attention. If you see parents that are commenting on that, try to get in touch with them. Try to hear their side. Don't just say, oh, this is someone who was upset, because we have nothing to gain from lying. And do not send your kids to Couch, Missouri, period. Don't do it.
Thank you so much for being brave and telling your story of being locked down in a residential program called the Lighthouse that was located in Jay, Florida. You've been such a blessing to have on the show. Thank you so much, Nikki, and I'm looking forward to many journeys with you. Thank you so much, Nikki, for coming on the show, telling your story. You were so brave, and I really appreciate you getting the awareness out of what really goes on behind closed doors. If you have a 1% chance that this could happen to your child, why would you even take that risk? My name is Nikki.